This webinar is brought to you by NetSupport. You can learn more about our products and what we do at netsupportsoftware.com. But for now, let's dive into meeting who is in the room today. I'll work from the order I can see here in front of me. So next to me on the screen, I can see Al Kingsley. So Al, could you share a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do, please?
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on when you're viewing this. Very briefly, multiple hats. Probably the one that's most relevant right here is Group CEO of NetSupport, 35 years in the educational technology space, but I also wear different hats. So 20 years as a MAT trustee working in the Academies programme, supporting the Department for Education in the East of England, and also chair of the BESA edtech group. So kind of a hat in both camps, and lovely to be surrounded by some fellow edtech folks who absolutely share and bring the love and experience today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Al. And so directly below me, it feels like some sort of quiz show now where we're on sort of different levels. But directly underneath me on my screen, I can see Matthew Weems. Matthew, could you talk a bit about who you are, what you do, and your role in education, please?
Yeah, I'm Matthew Weems. I'm the Assistant School Director at the Cambridge School of Bucharest, British school, an international British school in Romania. My main job is overseeing teaching and learning in the secondary. And as a computer science teacher, I've been helping with the digital strategy with technology for about 8 years now. And now for the last 3-4 years, how we can integrate AI into the curriculum in meaningful and safe ways.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matthew. And your sharing on LinkedIn, like the person who was just speaking a moment ago, Al, is prolific. And I have to say, I'm a bit of a fan of your newsletter. So please do check out Matthew and his work and sharing. Great to have a practitioner's voice sharing the things that work and the things that don't work as well, which are often equally as important as each other. Next up, we have Oliver. I know him as Ollie Lewis. Ollie, could you share a little bit about yourself, what you do, and your role in education as well, please?
Thanks, Mark. I've been in international education for kind of 7 going on 8 years now. I'm currently the head of secondary at Amity International School, Abu Dhabi. I'm an OG in the sense that I was one of the contributors to the original Creating a Digital Strategy Guide in Education. I was a co-author of the EdTech Playbook. I'm a guest awards judge focusing on EdTech, Global EdTech Awards judge, and the British Schools Middle East network lead for leadership.
Not to mention the big Abu Dhabi teacher conference you're heavily involved in as well, and many other.
And I've been an organizer of that, yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much, Ollie. And then in my bottom left, we've got Amelia King. Amelia, could you share a bit about yourself and your role in education as well, please?
Hello, I'm Amelia King. I'm the Director of Digital Transformation at Dulwich College here in London. Previously, Director of EdTech and Innovation at Dulwich over in Shanghai, and then back over here in the UK again, where I was teaching history. My big thing is all about, well, transforming the digital world here at Dulwich. And I also write lots on the side and waffle a little bit online as well. So you can find me there.
And this might be an opportunity while we're talking about nice things to do with you, Amelia, about a book you might have written.
Yes, I wrote a book. It's called Thinking with AI. Al is looking to see if he can see it on his shelf. It's all about metacognitive ways that you can make sure that you are encouraging yourself and your students to think while using AI. And it did get a good write-up from Al and Mr. Weems as well. So that's got to count for something.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much, Amelia. Last but by no means least, we have Ash Mudaliar with his contribution. Could you share a little bit about where you work, your role, and what you do in education as well, please, Ash?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. I'm Ash Mudaliar, Director of IT and EdTech at Creative Education Trust. I've been working in the education IT space for over 15 years now. I also chair the Queen Street EdTech Expert Group, which consists of both technology and education leaders from around 50 trusts, where we share best practice and developments from the sector and work collaboratively on key topics like AI, cyber, and digital strategy as a whole.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much indeed, Ash. And so welcome, everybody. As you can see, we have got, like I would say, a cornucopia of experience from international to local to all over the world in the broad because educational technology is absolutely massive, and making digital work in your schools is not an easy thing. And things have changed a lot. I think back to our first iteration, Al, of the digital strategy guide through to the most recent one, not including the one we just launched just a few weeks ago, where we drilled down a lot into things related to the pandemic and all those sort of things. From your perspective, what has changed since that last sort of version? Why do we do this? Why do we sort of create these sorts of things to try and help people? And why is a clear digital strategy more important now than ever, in your estimation?
Lots of big questions there. I mean, if we go back to the very, very first digital strategy that we worked on, Mark, since then we've had the BBC Micro, we've had the Amstrad and Atari's been released. So we've gone back quite a long way. I'm joking, of course, for effect. But in recent years, there's been a big acceleration. Certainly the last 2 or 3 years, there's been a huge acceleration on the digital landscape. And you could argue that we've been thinking about it post-pandemic in terms of more confidence or more accessibility to technology. We have a constant stream from a KIXI perspective of more digital means we've got to have different ways that we can monitor, assess that agency around the technology we use. There's a constant threat both in education and any other sector around cyber and making sure we keep our systems and of course our data secure. We've got a shift in terms of the pressures on school systems depending on where you are in the world. So the capital funding landscape means that we're often trying to get more out of what we've got, use things more purposefully rather than necessarily go out shopping. There's different challenges on the school priority list. Our risk register now has moved from some of the traditional let's all talk about progress and attainment to thinking about what can we do, how can technology be a lever to help us with things like recruitment and retention, inclusivity, hopefully being a lever towards attendance and how we might adapt and change the way that we engage with our learners. How do we make more time for our staff to be human beings and interact with learners and support some of the SMH challenges? So I guess we go kind of full circle to the very much focused now on the why. Why are we looking at digital? What are we trying to address? And then we can talk about how it can factor in. And I think now more than ever, there are so many pressures. I always refer to digital as simply a lever, whether we're looking in the UK system as in our multi-academy trust, capacity improvements or our strategic improvement, or on an international level where we're just looking at making sure that we can develop tools to actually be purposeful. And I think the final one is recognizing that whenever there's more choice, the natural persuasion is that's a good thing. But I think we're actually at a point in the system where when there's a lot of choice, we end up with a degree of stasis because we're really not sure what's to go next for, how to spend the limited funds we've got and how to use it, more effectively. So those all come full circle to why you need to have a digital strategy and a digital strategy guide that is constantly a living document, constantly evolving. And even if we were to just talk about AI, then naturally we'd say, well, we've got about an hour before there'll be some update. In fact, today it was the US introducing their AI frameworks. And by the time you are watching this recording, depending on where you are, there'll probably be 3 or 4 other iterations from around the world. So that's, I guess, the best summary I can give, Mark.
And it's funny, I mean, if you are watching this, go to Al's LinkedIn, because by his newsletter, he's already produced a lovely little infographic which breaks down that AI framework from the US and a lot of things around that too. And I should have a shout out as well, Al, for your newsletter. If you are not subscribed to Al's newsletter, then what rock have you been hiding under? I wanted to dive into your point there about it being a lever, Al, because often people conflate digital with meaning what happens in the classroom, and it's far more than that. We spent time in the guide talking about lots of different areas within the school. Could you just unpick a little bit about where you think technology can help? Because if you just focus on the classroom, we're missing an opportunity, aren't we?
I think there's lots of reasons right now why it's important not to get caught up in the stereotype that edtech as a word means the stuff that you, teacher and student, use to engage and learn in the classroom, full stop. That obviously is a really, really important part of the jigsaw puzzle. But actually around the world right now, we're seeing mixed messaging. We're seeing quite a lot of pushback. Technology is bad. Technology equals education technology. Education technology is no evidence of impact. We'd rather let children do the practical things, paper in their hand, books and so on. And we have to pause and say, educational technology is not just those curriculum resources and the devices in that child's hand. And we can all say we recognise there's areas where we can improve the pedagogical alignment on that. But it's also the technology that means that we can be data informed, not data led, as an educational establishment. It's absolutely the case that we've got everything from our management or student information systems, depending on where you are in the world, to the tools that we use for aggregating our data, to our finance systems, all the way through to everything we use from our access control to cashless catering to all sorts of things that make up the edtech ecosystem. What we're learning is when we think about the roles within a school, we're thinking about teaching and learning. Something that was a big theme at the Beck conference in London this year was having a new area to focus more about estates and operational side of things and how technology can unlock capacity or efficiencies. I think the big word when you're looking from a central team within an organization, something Ash could probably spend all day explaining from his perspective, it's all about economies of scale, looking at how you can provide a lever sustainability of what you're offering. And so the guide absolutely says, look, this isn't a case of just dive in if you're a teacher of a particular subject. It's actually look at it from all the different perspectives and roles. And my view is if we can work more purposefully and save money in the ecosystem that edtech covers as an umbrella, then we free up more funds for the really important stuff, which is the student and teacher centric part of the job.
Here, absolutely. And it's almost like you read my mind mentioning Ash there, because that leads like a brilliant segue to my question for Ash, which is related to your work at the Creative Education Trust. So you've got one of the case studies in the guide. It was really interesting reading how you're managing technology across your estate. It sounds like somewhere you might find some houses, but it's not. It's your IT estate, your whole sort of digital estate. Could you talk us through how your sort of more strategic approach, service-led approach to technology is helping improve things like consistency, financial planning, efficiency, all these kinds of things, please?
Absolutely, Mark. I'll cover a couple of the areas. I don't want to take up the whole webinar. But I mean, if I just start with the fact that as a trust, we're quite geographically spread out across the country. So at basic level, technology is really important to us to stay in contact with each other and collaborate with each other without having to constantly travel between our schools and the central office. So that certainly as a starting point is really important for us from a strategic enabler perspective. If I then go on to maybe the service desk side of things, so I think people are kind of very used to the typical kind of IT help desk, IT service desk. Well, we've really expanded that across multiple functions now. So it's become the CET service desk as opposed to the IT service desk, and we have estates, HR, and finance as part of that. So that enables staff to have that single portal to log any requests with the teams. It then gives us the data as function leaders to help inform resource management, where we're seeing issues with response and resolution times for a particular school that could really negatively impact the delivery of the service to support teaching and learning and operations. And we're starting to really push that down to school-based colleagues as well. So even our IT technicians are seeing all of that data. We did some awards at the end of last year as well to just really help encourage them and motivate them to support us with delivering as good a service as we can. From a financial planning perspective, this is, I think, so important given the state of finances within the sector. So working with school leaders to ensure that our, the hardware and software that we have available, both trust-wide and within our schools, meets their needs, their school needs, as well as the wider strategy. Things like hardware refresh are really important to ensure that things are fit for purpose for our schools, but also remain supported when you think about it from a security perspective. There's that now that we've had this process in place for a few years. I think there's a really good understanding from our school leaders that if you're thinking about adding an additional set of devices, then you need to account for that cost to refresh in 4 years' time, for example, and you've got to think about that life cycle perspective. I know with Windows 10 going end of life last year, that's been a real challenge for a lot of schools and trusts. And that ultimately comes down to that risk of kind of just eking out, these devices. Oh, we'll just leave it for another year. We won't think about when we need to refresh them, and then you then have that problem down the line ultimately. And I think unfortunately this area is going to be particularly challenging this year, with the increasing pricing we're seeing from hardware, both the prices increasing but also the availability. So really important around the financial side of things. But on a positive note, just referencing what Al just said earlier, I think the benefit of doing it this way, especially as a trust, are those economies of scale ultimately. If you know what you're planning to purchase, then you can do trust-wide bulk purchases, get the best pricing, and ultimately those savings go back to the schools, and they can spend on other things that really support and impact our students.
That's brilliant, Ash. Thank you so much for that. I want, if it's okay, I just want to come back to you on that really, because whilst you talked a little bit about the price of hardware in there, you spent an awful lot of time actually just talking about things to help humans, and some what would seem to be honestly sort of low-hanging fruit. If you've got a geographically disparate trust, why wouldn't you leverage technology to facilitate those sorts of things, or asking your schools what technology do you need? But the thing is, it sounds simple, but it's not, is it? And so you're clearly been on a journey. How difficult was it to get from where you might have been in the past through to where you are now to talk through all these different things? And what could you share that would be useful for our viewers to help them get from where you might have been in the past to where you are now with these gains that you're seeing, from efficiency to financial planning to reducing travel, all those different things?
Yeah, I think it's always, and I know all of you talk about this as well, and I've seen resources you share online and various other things. It's all about the why, the rationale. Why are you doing this? What is the benefit of doing this in a more structured way? So I think it is really very much around sharing that information as you start that process and moving towards where you want to get to. But I think especially when you've got a wider, you're in a larger trust, and not even, I suppose, even if you're in a single school, it's trying to build working groups and collaborating with different people in different functions, different school leaders, etc., to just make sure that what you're doing is going to work as a whole. But I think, yeah, certainly just starting with the rationale, the why, and what you're hoping the end result to look like is really important to articulate.
No, I completely agree, and it often sounds simple when you say it, but actually to go through those processes isn't easy, is it? It takes deep reflection and lots of conversations and involving all your stakeholders and all of that. So, no, I massively appreciate that, Ash. Thank you. It leads quite nicely actually on to Amelia, actually, because you're a director of digital transformation in your school, and your response to the guide, I've seen it on social media. You're going to talk about various fruit and vegetables, I believe, yeah, you're using it in your own context. What stood out to you in there, and how does it reflect the realities of leading digital transformation in schools such as yours? How have you found it useful? And I think that what Ash has been sharing there will segue quite nicely into what you're doing and what you're going to share now.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking as Ash was talking, I was like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, yeah. So before this call started, before we started recording, I mentioned I was going to talk about the onion, and everyone was like, but I wanted to talk about the onion. I think the onion is the best part of the guide, and kind of in a nutshell, it's a section of the guide that gets you to look at all of the digital tools that you have, at least from an educational perspective, whether it's something for creating resources, something for explaining, or for modeling. You're going to get it open, aren't you, Mark?
I am. I'm going to find it.
But it's just been a really great exercise. So, we, I think, are all at the point now where technology has been in the classroom for like 20, 30 years. And it looks like it when you start to list off all of the different bits of technology that you use. So I've come into a school that has that, and we decided to map all of the different tech tools that we were using, from toddlers all the way up to year 13, across faculties, across ages. And I kind of referred to it as the onion of nightmares, because unlike the nice one in the guide, our foundational onion has so many things that they don't all actually fit on the onion. And it's really been a great mapping exercise because, like Ash was saying, you need to really think about the why of everything. So the first step was actually categorizing everything we had and saying, well, are these actually used for resource creation, explanations, assessment, or people practice? And then you start to see, well, we've actually got 3 or 4 things that ostensibly do the same thing. And whilst coming in from the outside, I can say, well, clearly this is a problem. Unless the people who've been using these tools for a decade or even just 6 months, unless they can see that, they don't necessarily recognize that it's an issue. But if I show them the onion and I say, like, there are so many tools that we're asking our students to use that actually they don't all fit on one page, then everyone starts to go, oh, we need to think a little bit more and we really need to strategize. So I think like that was the really big standout for me in terms of something that I'm using and kind of have used ever since I first got the guide.
Brilliant, Amelia. Thank you. And I remember seeing your there was a photo you shared of a guide open with loads of post-its all over it, and then your sort of post-it wall with everything all over it. You shared, I don't know if you were able to share what you shared with us before we started recording, where things are looking at the moment. It's a bit blurry, but Ollie or Al, I'm the host, so I'm not going to jump in and do all the explanations and things. Would either of you like to sort of jump in and talk about the onion and how it links into things like the EIFS using digital tech in education guide, and the thinking and why it's helpful to have that within your sort of planning and what have you, within to sort of demonstrate what your actual teaching and learning ecosystem with technology is?
I'm happy to. I may well want to dip in as well. I think, like all these things, the most important thing with any kind of approach to a digital strategy is more to reflect than it is to aspire. And that might seem a bit strange, but it is about thinking about what you've already got and then understanding where you've got density. For a long time, I shared a much more simplistic how to evaluate technology. And the first or second part of that question is check what you've already got, because we all, whatever our roles, we all work somewhat in silos based on convenience, and we all reach for the thing we've always reached for because that's quicker than learning the better tool. But within the context that Ash has put there and Amelia's has kind of explained and visualized for us, the bigger question is actually if we look at where there are commonalities of tools that are more purposeful, and I can talk about it in my trust being much smaller than Ash's trust, but in the context that actually, it's not only about economies of scale when it comes to purchasing one license of one particular tool rather than 3 variables, but it's about ensuring that our support team have got confidence and expertise in one tool rather than 3 tools, and that we're actually able to share our professional development resources and our exemplars for staff around those tools in a much more effective way, because we're not trying to double, triple, and quadruple the resources we do. And I think the final one, which is what Amelia does there, is it's not until you actually look at what you've got that you think, actually, how often do I use all these things? And if I didn't have these 2 subscriptions, which I rarely touch, instead I could have something far more impactful on what I want to do. So, that's my clumsy way of saying I think sometimes we do have to reflect, we do have to put it out on the table. And that's why if anybody says to you the first question on a digital strategy is how big's your budget, they've missed the point.
I completely agree. Thank you, Al. Ollie, you've been nodding along. Was there anything you wanted to add on top of what Al shared there around
Mark, I probably have to
ecosystem?
say, I just need to slip that one in there at the moment from my never-ending bookshelf of all people. But thinking with AI from a certain Amelia King, good recommend for you there.
Yeah, I think Amelia missed that when you waved it around before. So get 2 shout outs. Brilliant stuff. Thanks, Al. Ollie, your thoughts?
I think Al kind of covered most of it. The only thing that I would really add to that is just never assume that signal and noise kind of are there. And I would always say, don't just assume because you've done one training session, that means it's stuck. You've got to go back to it and repeat it and repeat it. And teachers are humans, right? At the end of the day, as are and support staff. They're just like the children in our schools. So you need a diverse array of kind of mechanisms to train those people and follow up and continue, because, once doesn't mean done. you've got to go back to it, repeat and repeat to build kind of confidence, competence, cognizance, and all of those things that, you know, we've all talked about lots.
Can I also just
Brilliant.
challenge on that in my humble experience, the most amazing educators who are highly adept at how to embed learning and knowledge within their students seem to be frankly rubbish when it comes to applying the same rules when it comes to cross-school staff CPD. Now, of course, I'm
Can I
exaggerating.
get an amen for that as well, please?
For effect. But there is quite a lot to learn, but just pause and think about what's important. Why would we assume, you know, a bit like if we were to say, by the way, this webinar is going to be 4 hours. Why would we assume in the last 2 hours that people are going to actually remember it, and we're not going to have that forgetting curve, and we're not going to say, and yet that's what we do. We kind of rush it in, and you've got 1 day of learning at the start of the academic term and year, and we think, exactly as Ollie's just said there, that that's sufficient to embed, even though 20 minutes after hearing advice on a new tool, you're going to be going through the new Kixie guidance or the new framework that you need to read and sign off on, and then the fire drill, and then introducing you to new staff, and the list goes on.
Don't forget the EpiPen there, Al. And whilst we're on the front of effective professional development, it's interesting. The Education Endowment Foundation, as many everyone here will know, and most of you will know, share brilliant guidance. And so, in the professional learning section in the guide, just like we saw. Amelia mentioned the different sort of sections about where technology can have an impact and mapping those tools on the onion around things like people practice, explanations and modeling, feedback, resource creation, all those sorts of things. Equally, the EAF have got a brilliant implementation guide, which links into how you make change happen. And whilst you might be a fan of like nose to T and those sort of various change management approaches and diagrams and all the rest of it, it is like Ollie and Al have said about recognizing that, you know, I'll hit the nail on the head with the, you know, teachers are great at being teachers, but not very good at teaching each other sometimes. He said for effect, but it is true. And the various nods and the hands in the air we saw around the room are kind of testament to that. You'll find information about all that in the guide as well, in the teaching and learning and professional development sections inside the guide as well. I want to jump over now to you, Matthew, because I feel like everyone's had a say, and I've not heard anything from you yet. So, and as if by magic, the rotating carousel of books is now up, and I think you might have more than one there actually. Your case study talks about AI and when it became a serious conversation in your school, and how you rooted it into sort of embedded in teaching priorities rather than hype, which is, you know, for me, absolutely spot on. What were the sort of key decisions, Matthew, that helped you sort of move from that curiosity part to the sort of strategic part, with the lens of your school being in the EU as well, right? And so, as Al just held up as well there, you are somewhat of an aficionado around the EU AI Act as well, given you've written books about it as well. So, for those who are outside the EU, and I particularly mean myself and Ash and Amelia and Al, although I think we're all informed by the EU AI Act with things around data privacy, ethics, bias and safeguarding. What sort of impact has all that had on your leadership and management of digital strategy in your school? And yeah, can you share a little bit about your journey and things you've learned along the way?
Well, I always think, well, like I was in a lucky position because I speak to loads of other people that kind of follow the same things, have an interest in AI and want to bring it into their school, but they're a teacher at the teacher level and they're often shouting up at SLT. I feel that my role, that I was kind of the person that all the heads of department reported to. So I could get them together in our meetings and one-to-one and do like the constant CPD with them, where I could show them different ways they could use it. I imagine traditionally it was like, here's a prompt you could try, kind of like if you think back 2 or 3 years, there's lots of prompt sharing that everyone was doing. And then over time, people started to develop that into something that would work for their own teams and starting to find like a workflow with that. And again, linking back to CPD, that was creating opportunities where you could get people into our IT labs or on devices and just give them a workshop where they could experiment and get them to work on something that we're going to work on anyway, and see what role AI played in that. And then reflecting on what it felt like, is that useful? Does it add something to what you're doing? Does it replace a bit of your, as Amelia talks about, does it replace a bit of your thinking? Like it's a lot of like the having those ongoing conversations with people, but it's a challenge to do that in a school. Like AI isn't our only priority. We've got so many other things going on that we need to do. Like we're building 2 new buildings that are going to open up in August at my school. That is slightly a higher priority in general than AI is on some of the agendas. So I have to keep making sure that messaging is there and that support is there for people. And yeah, workshops is the big thing. And I think if you mentioned linking it to the Educational Endowment Foundation, the research there, and see what you can pull from that. And our SDP, what are we working on as a school? Like, where do we want to go as a school? From our recent inspection, and this is public knowledge, was we needed to improve how we give feedback to students, and we give students opportunities to respond to feedback. So we looked at the role that AI could play in that. We've looked at AI marking tools. We haven't gone down that direction, but we've looked at the way that, like I'm talking to you now, how AI can capture my spoken word and turn that into more actionable feedback faster for students that they can respond. I can turn that into bespoke resources for students using something like a Canva code. So we've done lots of training about how teachers can take and build things that really would have taken them a little bit longer than they would have gone, no, I just can't do that. That's too much. I'll do this instead. And replacing that. So now when a student sat an assessment, they will get like a Canva dashboard with all the different questions, the answers to those questions, model answers, challenge questions with model answers now. So we've really used an AI tool there to enhance that whole feedback process I think in a very, very positive way. It's not outsourced any of the thinking part. It's it means a student doesn't have to wait. If they only got question 9 wrong, they haven't got to sit through someone explaining the other 8 questions where they went wrong. So you can really target and speed that feedback and student voice every single time we do something with AI, especially if we put a chat bot in front of students. We get student feedback on how that felt. Did that help? Sometimes they tell us a hindrance. Sometimes they tell us that AI was too nice to them, too rude to them. Because of the new DFE guidance, we've stripped out a lot of the fluff, like a lot of the saying how great they are all the time, as it usually does. So now they're finding it a bit rude. So trying to respond to them and their feedback there. And as you said in the EU, having those overarching principles, there's really solid ones about transparency. So we have to be really clear with our community about when we're using AI, what we're using it for. That is a disclosure that we're making to all our parents. It's something we talk about with our staff. And as you guys have said about that mapping, someone would go to a bet or go to an online demo, find a tool, sneakily bring it in. Now, because the requirements on the school in the EU from this August, if the digital omnibus doesn't go in and things get delayed a little bit, but within August at the earliest, maybe another year, like there's heavy fines attached to you not being transparent at you. So if a teacher sneaks in a little tool and is grading students' work in the background with AI, you can suddenly get yourself into very tricky territory. So we've had to have a bit more of a firm hand on what edtech is in the school. Again, it's hard to keep up because everything's got AI in it. So it's hard to keep up what the new AI feature is when it gets rolled out. So continue with like that onion, returning back to the onion and auditing the onion multiple times. And I think we're fortunate that I've been in charge of our onion. So we have a very lean onion. It's like it's a shallot, probably more than an onion. So trying to keep it nice and lean and review that quite often. And yeah, and if it's veers into those high risk categories, which I think the EU are still kind of ironing out the final guidance on those, then how we respond to that and what are the risk attached and we're almost doing risk assessments now as like data protection impact assessments. We're doing fundamental right impact assessments as well. So if I used an AI to grade the student's work, that grade goes on a transcript, that transcript goes to university and that stops them getting in. And that was an AI who graded it wrong. Ultimately, that AI impacted that child's life. So we have to take these kind of big, kind of very ethical decisions now about what tools we bring in and what features we want in the tools. And that is a discussion at teacher level, at school level. And if we said, yeah, we want AI to mark all the kids' work, we've got to be comfortable enough with that ethically and risk assess that enough that we've put that out there into the community. That has really given us that kind of guiding light. And just to caveat, Al has held up the guide. It's taken it off Amazon at the moment because there's that many updates that are happening to the EU AI Act with the timelines and amendments. I didn't want people to read it and get the wrong impression about timelines and what was happening. So that's currently off the shelf, and I will be working on that probably over the summer and sending out version 2.0 will come out once the EU decide what's going on.
Al, you wanted to jump in a second there.
Yeah,
Thank
I mean,
you,
firstly, clearly, I want a refund, Mr. Weems. I mean, I've just got my book and now it's out of date. I'm joking. It's
I'll tell you what dates to cross out and rewrite the new ones on, Al.
It's an excellent guide, and the truth is, in this pace, everything's constantly updating. I just thought it was interesting you shared. I think there's quite a seismic shift that affects education as much as any sectors with the EU AI Act and where that might go, because there is already a lack of appetite for the organizations and entities that invest in technology businesses within the AI space, because there's a requirement to be more transparent and show the IPR and how the technology is utilized. There's different layers between what they have to show to the EU itself and what they have to show to the users. And so there's a little bit of almost a rollback. Now, I'm not saying that, I fall on the camp of a product's got to stand up for its own efficacy and it's got to have the right purpose and output. But I suspect there might be a slowing of breaks of some of the new technology being available in the EU in the short term, whilst that level of transparency and sharing direct to the EU of intellectual property gets pulled through. Matt, you might want to set me straight on that with any updates.
Yeah, I just think because it's from what I saw at BET, there's loads of the tools out there that I think that, in my mind, coming from a context of looking at through the EU lens and them not being 100% a decision on that high risk area about grading of work and what that means, trying to find what going for us as a school to jump foot first or jumping straight into getting a tool that would mark work, that's an area for me where I'm not sure whether we can make a decision on that yet. So there's some questions around what features a tool can have to be considered a higher risk that would then give the school a lot of implications. I do like to try to keep things simple. So having to deal with a lot more paperwork and a lot more implications and a lot more pathways and parents having options to push back on, okay, that AI graded my kid's work. Where's the paper trail? Can you tell me how it made the decision? If it's Gen AI, I probably couldn't. It's that black box aspect of as well. So it's a school being willing to take on that additional responsibility if they wanted to go down that high risk area. But either way, we've done a lot of training about transparency. So if we have to make a image in even something like Canva of a historical figure, is that a deep fake? Do we need to make students aware of that? And even for us, we've gone, okay, in terms of deep fake, media, it's not really going. If you're using an AI to generate a real case scenario of a soldier in World War II, is that a deep fake? Because that didn't really happen, and a kid might think that happened, and then it might bring that into an assessment. So we're being very careful about what AI outputs we put in front of the students and how we frame. Again, we've probably gone a bit down the rabbit hole of what a deep fake is, but I think AI generating a primary source that goes to a young child probably isn't the way to go. So we've come up with a line in the sand as a school about what we think about images and text and audio and how we align with the EU and maybe add our own internal spin on that as well.
Thanks, Matt. There's so much. I'm loving this conversation, and please do, if you've got something else you want to chip in, Ollie, Ash, or Amelia, please feel free to come on in. But if it's okay, I want to reflect on some of the things you've been sharing, Matt, because I think they're really, really useful. Because one thing that sort of jumps at me straight away was your decision to not, and if people sort of were to see you in your sharing and generally sort of, a generalistic kind of look at what you do share about your work and what have you on LinkedIn or wherever, it would seem like you're, the AI guy. I love AI. You're wearing the t-shirt, I heart AI. And I think we all love AI, but what's really, I really love was, it's not, there's an incredible amount of thinking that goes on. And so the fact that you haven't gone in, as you said, two-footed on a complete AI marking system, and then when you came back and said about, and this for me was the key bit, was where you were talking about where It was about using Canva and Canva's coding tools and going and having the ability to use that where it enhanced the process of feedback. Right, there's so much research that shows that where you use technology to guide what you're doing, it kind of takes that piece away from what we can do best, which is supporting what we do and using AI as a tool to support the day-to-day work in things like feedback, or we've talked about it from the EVE stuff, people practice and explanations and modeling, all those different things. I think it's really, really useful. So thank you so much for all of that, and you've shown the breadth of things as well. And we won't have time to dive into it today, but I'm reminded from that conversation about deep fake images of a really lovely newsletter post that you did about the use of actual children's photos, and in a world where things can be so easily deep faked. And we read reports from the Internet Watch Foundation about AI generated CSAM and whatnot. So I love all the thinking that's going on behind the scenes, because it isn't about using all the tools. It's about being really, really selective. And so again, I love that you've got that lean onion, the lean ecosystem. Amelia, you got your hand up.
I do, very politely. No, first of all, I just wanted to say I always want to be in Matt's class. Like, it always seems so much fun, all of the Canva code that you do. But no, I just wanted to say really quickly, like, linked to everything that you were saying about your lean onion. Like, we're talking about digital strategy today, and I think something that people get really surprised about, like you guys, I'm like, I love parts of AI. Sometimes the digital strategy has to be, no, we're not going digital for this. And people get really surprised. Like, I come in, I've got the silliest job title in the world, Director of Digital Transformation. And sometimes I say to people, okay, then, like, we're not using tech for this, or we're not using AI for this. And I think they get very surprised, because the assumption is that you're going digital for everything. So I kind of wanted to put that out there as another element to strategy, I think.
That's very, very timely that you've mentioned that, because the next question is going to go to Ollie Lewis, and I think he's got a word beginning with C that he might mention in what he shares now, is something that he might have written about in that book that Al started to float up towards the screen now. Ollie, you contributed. I mean, you and I have worked together on so many different things, including that thing that Al's waving around there at the back. But you've been a long-time advocate of evidence-informed uses of technology, and like Amelia says, it's not about just because you can do something with technology doesn't necessarily mean that you should, right? So, as someone who's won awards for his implementations of technology in some of the schools you've worked in, so all manner of things, what difference does it make when a school has a genuine, solid, sort of coherent digital strategy over time, rather than just a collection of tools? Because we're talking with this onion stuff about that is essentially a collection of tools. And I want to add some extra layers onto the question as well, Ollie, which I know you haven't prepared for, but I'm going to do it anyway because you're good. You're good under pressure. We talked an awful lot about teaching and learning stuff, but think about your finance, your marketing, your other central ops sort of teams. What else can we be thinking about? Because surely the onion we'd be talking about is for teaching and learning, but how does that fit into the broader ecosystem around helping other functions within your school, as someone who's got a responsibility for a whole secondary school?
Sure, I think the most important thing there is this idea, and then it becoming a reality of coherence. Technology in a broader sense, when it's deliberate, and it's a deliberate lever for kind of school and the improvement of the school, rather than just a kind of bunch of grab bag tools, as it were, of different functions, becomes the real difference when things are kind of coherent across. When your school's got a real proper digital strategy that's had great thinking around it, tech just stops being that kind of selection of random items and becomes deliberate. And that's where you get that school improvement and school driving on. And you get clarity on the why, and it's clear that you're trying to improve that particular thing. Rather than just being something you buy like a tool set, you've got a strategy, and that's what you become as an organization or as a school. So you might change kind of practice or routines, and that's where transformation kind of really comes from. And I think that what's really important is you move from activity actually to impact. And when you look at it across the kind of stake of your entire organization, you shift from this kind of idea of IT will sort that to becoming, well, this is actually how we operate. And that's where it really sticks in an organization. So it drills down into areas like your financial alignment. And you need financial alignment, like Ash kind of mentioned earlier, because that's where your strategy becomes sustainable. Ultimately, you've got kind of total ownership of the cost and that kind of renewal planning, life cycle of devices, like Ash said, but also the other costs that you don't necessarily think about, like staff training. And actually, what's the ongoing cost for that? Because ultimately, in an organization, like time is money, right? Whether you're in the state or the private sector, kind of every action that you take off the back of a decision does cost money in some way, shape, or form. And it aligns to all the other areas in your school as well, whether that be the alignment of like safeguarding and privacy. You generate and build trust, reduce risk once that's aligned as a part of your strategies. It's the same with data protection, the vendor checks that you might go through, and all of those kind of secure practices that start to bring coherence into your system as a result of having a really clearly articulated and defined digital strategy. It touches on SEND and accessibility. And that's not just for the students in your classrooms, that's also for all of the people and stakeholders in your organization. So you move from being kind of inclusion is optional to actually it's not optional, it's for everybody. And that's baked and built into the systems and routines and platforms and content that you communicate, articulate, and becomes your normal ways of working. It transcends to governance in your organization. When your governor team are really, really engaged in what you do and they're aligned with that, you get the proper challenge. And you get proper assurances from that section of your school. And that's where you can make developments, whether that be in the kind of cyber arena, the procurement arena, the compliance arena, or just your whole educational institution. So I think that kind of central ops element of it is really what matters, and where you can make massive leverage from everything from onboarding, offboarding, identity, access control, communications, what your support model and structures look like, because lots of those things are actually where the kind of hidden workload can live in your organization. So once you get kind of clarity on those areas, and I really like what Matthew said earlier, where he talked about, keeping it simple and you keep it streamlined. Simplification is probably one of our greatest assets. When you do have fewer platforms, or at least you have really clear on what each platform's purpose is and why it's there, expectations for everybody are clearer. You can be much clearer on what your training looks like, and you have much less system noise and much more reliability. And then you move from a place of being kind of the strategy or edtech just being this is fun or interesting into actually we can rely on that, and that's what we do, and we do it because. So it leaves kind of less guesswork for people, and it stops you being in that kind of mindset of, well, this is just a project, to actually being, well, this is how we run and this is what we do. It's a bit like how you attend to behavior or safeguarding in your school. So while there might be this perception that, well, IT keep the lights on, actually your digital strategy decides what your lights for in this particular part of our school. And I think that that's really important. And that coherence it transcends into kind of that clarity and consistency around expectations, our kind of shared boundaries, what support looks like, and all of those other facets in our school or your school.
Thank you so much, Ollie. Al, you've been twitching a bit like you want to jump in there. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
It's a natural twitch at this point. I mean, I've been sitting and being well behaved for an hour, so I mean, it happens. I mean, there's lots of stuff that Ollie shares there that really aligns. I've always been a sense that we're having to relearn what words mean. We used to think and say sustainability and immediately think we were going to talk about the green team and the environment, and now we're recognizing it's all about the things we do. How do we make sure they've got lasting impact and we can continue to do those things? And that changes our thinking. We used to say governance and immediately think of it's like the older folks sat around a room on an evening at 6 o'clock drinking coffee and telling everybody how to do their jobs. And I can say that because I can be found guilty in that camp of that category. However, governance is about now much more about empowering us to have confidence. It's much more focused around the concepts of being clear in our intent with technology, with purpose, with all decision making on who do we consult, who do we inform, and who decides, to make sure that we've got that transparency. And I think all these things, Mark, as you know, it's stuff that we've written about and done before, is, confidence is that hidden thing that if you have it, it allows you to move forwards. It allows you as a digital lead to say, I want more of this stuff because I can evidence its impact and I have confidence in its use. It allows you as a leader to say, this is good use of our funds and I can back it up and challenge it with my governing body, my trust board, because I've got confidence in the impact of it, and more importantly, the confidence in that sustainability piece. So what we're starting to see is there's not a separate conversation where digital is just digital. It is interwoven into all the other more fundamental conversations we're having around the sustainability of our respective education setting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It goes to and referring back to Amelia's point before as well about, when to or not to. That knowledge comes from that confidence and the ability to know what works within your strategy and within your setting, isn't it? Me and Ollie talk about that idea of cognizance, don't we? And so when you've got that there, then you're in a really strong position to, like you say, I'll move forwards with that confidence, aren't you? Amelia, you've got your hand up. Very politely again.
I was just going to say, kind of following on from that, having a strategy also removes you from the picture. So if someone came to me the other day and wanted a new AI tool, and I said no, and then I said, because it doesn't align with this, that, and the other that we have codified, and we need to go through this process. So it becomes less about you being the gatekeeper, you stopping them from doing what they want, and becomes more about, you can't make a strategy by yourself. It has been codified by a number of people who all believe in these same things. So it's not my fault and it's okay. And I just think that does makes it safe for you, but it also makes it safe for them to question because they're not questioning you as a person. Yeah, that's my contribution.
And as I've heard a number of people say, from the people in the room here today, it takes a village. It isn't about a single point of one person. It's the voices that have come from all the questions, all the conversations, all the feedback, all the consultation. It's everyone's strategy. It's not just Amelia's, and so that really helps with that conversation. Listen, thank you all so much for all of your engagement and points and sharing right across the gamut today. We could obviously chat for a lot longer, but we don't want to be keeping our viewers or you any longer than where you need to be. I'm going to wrap up with one final question, please. If somebody was to download this guide this week from schooldigitalstrategy.com, we're all going to get our little guides out now. If you were to download it, if somebody was to download it this week, what one section or idea would you encourage them to start with and why? And I'm going to go in reverse order now. So if I almost like I said, left to take the best. I'm going to go backwards. Ollie, what would be the one area you'd say to dive into straight away, and not the sort of second page where there's a lovely picture of me and Al, obviously, and Liz, who isn't with us today, but I should do a shout out for the other author in the guide, Liz Berry, who did amazing, which she does amazing work for us at NetSupport as well, with so much of our outputs. Massive shout out to Liz. But Ollie, what would be the one thing you say people should dive into straight away?
I'd probably suggest that you just kind of going on from my part, jump into that bit on kind of measuring operational impact of what you're doing. And as a part of that, I think it's really powerful when you can kind of map a user journey and their experience and actually see the maturity of things as they're developing across there. So I really enjoyed that part of the guide, and I think it's really helpful that you've kind of codified in there what a SWOT analysis is, what a pestle analysis is, and kind of like gone through, right, here's some thinking for you that you can immediately road test yourself against and immediately get diagnostic information on. So I would start there.
Wicked, thank you, Ollie. And I think going backwards again was Matthew next. So Matthew?
I like this page by you, Mark. This is nice, very nice visual diagram to have a look around, because I know we spoke about the onion already, but this is also nice and visual. If you're thinking about bringing, again, it's for AI, but if you think about any tech or any tool, and then I would recommend skipping to the back and look at the safeguarding section, because I think that's going to be a very big focus in keeping children safe next year, and to loop our DSLs in more, which I don't think they're always getting a final sign off on some of the edtech we bring in. So I think that's going to be more and more important from August this year as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matthew. And yeah, two things to respond to that. Firstly, thank you for the shout out for the maturity matrix. That's actually a development of the impact effort prioritization matrix aligned with things like Mandan Action Klein's teacher confidence and competence scale. And so then thinking about them on sort of an organization level and then giving some ideas for if you are in this quadrant, how could you then move to this and that and all of that sort of thing. And then the second thing, I don't know if you've seen the DFE KIXI consultation that came out end of last week. There's some real, I think, improvements being suggested in there around the roles of DSLs, the role of deputy DSLs, the role of DSLs being involved even more in being not just involved in the things they were involved with before around online safety and filtering and monitoring, but also the tools. And some of you and I have both commented on as well with the product safety expectations. If a tool is teacher or student facing, tools should now have, as part of the onboarding process, the DSL's name, email address, all that sort of stuff built in de facto on any AI tools as well. So you're absolutely spot on there. So thank you for the shout outs for this. And your comments about the safeguarding and its importance there, I think, is absolutely spot on. Thank you, Matthew. I think Amelia was next.
You told us not to say page 2, so I'm actually saying page 3, the contents. But bear with, because I would say go through the table of contents and choose something that you think you're really good at, and then go and look at it and realize that you're actually not as good at it as you think you are. That might just be what happened to me, but I was like, yeah, like I totally know what I'm doing in this area. And then it gives you all of these questions and it says like, have you considered this? And you go, no, haven't considered that. And it gives you a starting point because you must already be doing something if you think you're doing well at it. So table of contents is my pick.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you. And that's lovely feedback as well for the quality of the content inside here. So thank you so much. Thank you. Next, we've got Ash, I believe.
Right, over to me. So
straight to your case study, yeah? Straight to your case study.
That's it. Straight to my case study, exactly. So after you've read that, I was going to say the whole school ecosystem, but I know that's been taken, so to speak, because I thought that was a really good way to just visually show that wider ecosystem. But the other aspect I would say to take a look at is the digital and AI literacy part, because I think that is just a piece we often don't spend enough time thinking about and actually giving it the time it needs, because often you go straight to AI and actually the digital literacy piece before that isn't there essentially, as well as the AI side of things.
Great stuff. Thank you very much there, Ash, and for your contribution to the guide, and to Matthew as well. I didn't say thank you to you for your case study as well, Matthew. Thank you so much. And Al, wouldn't have been you in the background with someone else talking about, and then you waving the relevant section up in front of us. That was
badly, but I tried.
Lovely design of yours as well, Al. What would you be guiding people towards?
Well, I had that page open conveniently, not knowing that Ash was going to pick it. But the reason I think is because we often get drawn to the complexity of the digital conversation and, dare I say it, the big words that are built around the things we need to think about. And there is sometimes an element of, no matter where we are in our professional journey on digital, just to pause and go back to the foundations. And particularly when it comes to AI, I think that sense of getting back to the core literacy and not taking the stuff that we know for granted, but thinking about how that might shape how we communicate outwardly what we're thinking about and why we're trying to do that, and how we can do that in a way that is both purposeful, impactful, and safe. And you touched on KIXI updates. Obviously, folks will be around the world, but we're starting to see, the more we're using digital, the more we're trying to keep kids safe online and monitor, the more that's now moving to an annual expectation of a conversation with governing bodies. We've kind of moved from having to make sure we share our accounts terminally and making sure we have our attendance data being brought forward for conversations that we have at governing bodies and trust board meetings. And now we're seeing that sense of, we want to empower digital to be used safely and purposefully, but we also need to make sure that governance sense of it comes together. So I kind of think is, don't feel anyone's judging. Go back to the basics, just reflect on the foundations and those stepping stones and make sure, particularly in the AI context. I love it when folks just out of the blue say, have you ever done an output, and then ask the question, can you tell me what steps you took to mitigate bias in your output? And every week I see another strand from somebody who says, throw that on the end and just see whether you actually can think about it. And it's quite simple, but the truth is, the more we know, I think the more we have to go back to the beginning just a little bit.
Well, you don't want to build your house on sandy land, do you? Although don't say that at a conference in Dubai, which I believe both of you actually heard me say one time. Look, thank you all so much. I am going to be cheeky and ask one more question of all of you, but the one question requires a 1 or 2 or 3 word sort of answer. Okay, I want to give, because whilst I would say this, whilst this is brilliant, it takes more reading and more knowledge than just this. Okay, I'm going to put a caveat on top of it. We can't recommend Matt's or Matthew's or Al's newsletter or anything else like that, or any of our books or anything like that. One resource, one thing to help leaders, people invested in thinking about digital strategy, one resource to help. And I'll go to back the way others came. So Al, one resource people could have a look at to help them in all of this.
Well, I'm not going to name a resource because I'm a rebel. I'm going to go back the one which I think is more important, which is either ask the question to the stakeholders where we're delivering our digital, how can I help you, to actually understand? And then the other old adage, which we all have to sometimes pause and remember, and I share it regularly, which is you've got 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth. When it comes to developing your strategy, use those in appropriate proportions.
Absolutely. Here. It goes to that quote that Gary Henderson often shares about the most intelligent person in the room is the room, isn't it? By taking on board the voices of all the people there, you're going to learn so much. Thank you.
I'll now get Matthew to code me an app this afternoon that does those 2 eyes, 2 ears, and a mouth for me. But there you go.
We'll see some, for those of you who haven't, won't see this for a little while until it goes out, we'll see some random posts from Matt in about 20 minutes. Ash, what's your one resource people can go and check out?
So I would say, if you don't already have the awareness, is to check out the DFE digital and technology standards, because I think it's a really good tool to help ensure that you have the basics in place, like your infrastructure, online safety, cybersecurity, to help underpin your overall digital strategy.
Yeah, brilliant shouts out, fantastic. Thank you, Ash. Amelia.
Well, I'm bringing the AI into it all then. I would actually say something like Notebook LM. If you plug in a couple of useful things into Notebook LM and really make your own little learning area, you can then interrogate it. But where it goes up kind of to the next level is, or at least the way that I've done it, is I've got transcripts of conversations with stakeholders, and then with their permission, I've put that into the notebook as well. So that way it becomes, I suppose, extra ears, as Al would put it in the ratio. And it really does become an extra way of finding out more about what your stakeholders need that you might have missed in the conversation, and also trying to link it to whether it's research or policies or experience, whatever it might be. I found that like just crazy helpful.
That's a really good approach there. I only consider that myself, so thank you for that idea. I mean, that's really good. It's that single source of truth, isn't it? You know, it's not pulling in loads of things from other places, but what you actually choose to put in it. So thank you. Next up, we've got, I think it's Matthew next.
So I'm just going through the generative AI product safety standards, the updates from the UK government, and then I'm looking at the tools we're working with and working with providers and having conversations, because like it came out like 2 days before BET, which I thought was a great time for everyone to showcase their new AI products when there was new standards to go by. So having conversations with the companies we're working with and using them as a reference point. And if we're rolling out any AI, how are we going to meet those standards? Even though we're abroad, we still follow all DFE policies as closely as possible, being a BSO school. So that's on my mind.
I'm going to be really annoying, and I'm not going to do what you want me to do. I'm going to follow Al's lead on that.
Yes,
and given that kind of, well, it's got to be done. I'm actually going to, number one, say that I really do think that everyone should go and get the guide. I think it's such a good starting point, and actually I think that there's something in here for absolutely everybody, no matter what your maturation stage is. And I do think that you should go download this. This should become mandated reading, I think, for pretty much everybody in your school and organisation, from the governors all the way down to teachers, because there's something that everybody can take from any section within there. And if I just give one like really obvious example, most people don't really know what the IT team do on the back end. So probably start there if you're a teacher, to get to understand the work that that function in your organisation does, because there's lots of other things in here that are pertinent to absolutely everybody. So download it, add it as required reading, and actually then have an agenda item in each level of your meetings across your whole organisation for something that you A, learn from that, and B, think you need to act on. So I'm going to go with that. I'm sorry for being a rebel.
If my microphone wasn't in a nice little tripod, I'd pick it up and drop it, Ollie. Thank you so much. So listen, that's just for me now to say thank you so much to Al, to Matthew, to Ollie, to Amelia, to Ash, and to you for joining us on this webinar from NetSupport. Please do go to netsupportsoftware.com, and if you want to find out more about our events, then obviously you can sign up for updates via the website. You can go to our Eventbrite and get an alert when a new webinar comes online. And if you don't do any of that, do what Ollie says. Go and grab yourself a copy of the School Digital Strategy Guide. And please do check out everyone, all their information, their newsletters, their books, their publications. All of that will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us on this webinar today. Very, very much appreciated. And we'll see you on the next one. Take care, everybody.